both in the room and virtually. Could I particularly welcome Dr. Josh Andrews from Bangor University, who's going to be talking about religion, values and ethics education briefing shortly. So welcome, Josh. Before then, are there any apologies, Michelle?
No apologies today.
Great, thank you. Are there any disclosures? I should mention that I'm a member of SACRA, which is obviously coming up with religious education. And even though it's not been discussed, it is on a future visit. I am a governor at Bishopston Comprehensive. So any others?
A member of SACRA, if I may just declare as well. Thank you, Lyndon.
Great, thank you, Mike. Are there any disclosures? Michelle will send out the necessary templates. Obviously, the prohibition of whip votes. Could we move now very quickly on to the minutes of the previous meetings? And first of all, the meeting on the 12th of February. Has anybody got any queries with that? If so, can we? Are you happy for that to be declared as a true record of that meeting? Yes. Yeah, good. And the second one was the online meeting where we met the chairman and governors and chair of governors and the deputy and acting head teacher and the new head teacher at Clydach Primary School. And is everybody happy with those minutes? Yeah, okay, great, fine, thank you. The next item was letters, and my letter to Councillor Robert Smith as the cabinet member. Any queries on that? No, okay, great, thank you very much. And we move swiftly on to item, public question time. There are no public questions have been received. So we then quickly move on to item 7, which is religion, values and ethics in education, a briefing. With that, we've got obviously with us Councillor Robert Smith, the cabinet member, Helen Morgan-Rees, the director of education, and Jennifer Harding-Richards from SACRA, along with Dr. Josh Andrews. How do you want to play that? Who wants to kick off? Jennifer, do you want to say something?
It'd be sensible for Josh to start.
Okay, great. Well, Josh, welcome.
Hello.
There you are. Great, good to see you. I think we met, albeit virtually, before when you and you met with Mike as well when at the SACRA meeting. So welcome to the Education Scrutiny Performance Panel at Swansea Council, and over to you.
Thank you. I'm just gonna try and see if I can share my screen. It's crossed. There we go. If I'm right, everyone can now see that, yeah?
Great, thank you.
Yes.
So the data I'm presenting to you today is based off a questionnaire survey that we released towards the end of the academic year last year. The survey went live just at the start of June and was open till the end of September this academic year. We had 58 participants respond to the survey, the vast majority of which were secondary school teachers. And I'm going to give you a quick whistle-stop tour of some of the most significant findings we've had. If any of you would like a copy of either the abridged report or the full report, do feel free to contact myself or the National Centre via ncrew@bangor.ac.uk, and we're more than happy to share a copy of either the abridged or the full report with you. The questionnaire itself had 11 central questions, and from those questions, we have really focused in on this presentation on 5 key findings, but there is some additional information I can share with you as well. The first question which we wanted to hone in on, and possibly the most concerning for me personally, was we asked schools to verify whether RVE was a compulsory subject for all students within their school from the ages of 3 to 16. So obviously primary school, we were focusing on reception to Key Stage 2, secondary schools, we were looking at year 7 through to year 11. Of the 54 people who responded, we had 40% of respondents say yes, it was a compulsory subject, and 58% of the respondents to say no. To put this into context, no primary school reported that RVE was not compulsory for all students. It was only in the secondary sector where it was reported that RVE was not compulsory. There was a follow-on question that asked staff to share some information about if it wasn't compulsory, which year group, so on and so forth. And overwhelmingly, what we found was the 58% of schools that said no, it wasn't a compulsory subject. It was Key Stage 4 provision. Many schools had reported that since the advent of the new curriculum for Wales, there had been the demise of Key Stage 4, with STLs or head teachers making the decision that ultimately that curriculum time could be used elsewhere. This meant for many that short course GCSE was no longer being offered in the school at all, and RE as a GCSE was either an option or there was no provision whatsoever for students, meaning that 58% of the schools that we surveyed were actually breaking the law. The next question we wanted to run down was, we asked were the resources that were available to help with the development of RVE within the curriculum. 42% of the schools that responded said yes, 58% of them answered no. This question saw a really large disparity between English medium and Welsh medium schools, with the vast majority of Welsh medium schools suggesting that there was no tailored support through the Welsh language. There is obviously one textbook that has been produced by Pearson for RVE, but that is only available in English, and having contacted Pearson, they have confirmed there is no intention to provide a Welsh medium translation of that textbook. We have been informed by teachers who undertook the survey that they've actually contacted the publisher and stated, are you happy for us to translate sections of the textbook ourselves? And there has been no reply whatsoever, meaning that the schools have taken that to be a blanket no, they're not happy for the schools to translate portions of the textbooks themselves.
Josh, sorry to interrupt. Are we supposed to be seeing the second slide now?
Oh, has it not come up?
No.
Oh, that's odd.
We got the title slide.
Oh,
We can see the thumbnail, but not the main one.
I'm not sure why that's not coming up. That's quite strange. One sec. Again. Is that working now? Or is it still just the title slide?
It's still on the first slide.
Title slide, yeah.
I have no clue why that's not working. It's on my computer showing up the second slide. Right. Are you happy then for me just to read the statistics to you? Because I have no clue how to get this actually working for you guys now. I've tried it.
Yeah, that's fine. Maybe Michelle can forward the slide to us later.
Yeah, no problem. I can send a copy of the PowerPoint across, no problem. Of those schools then that said that there was support, the majority of the support that was noted was either from RE Today or from various courses, extracurricular activities and support offered by Jennifer, which meant that primarily that schools were either having to pay RE Today for subscriptions to get support to help develop the RVE curriculum, or were solely reliant on Jennifer for that additional support that they needed whilst trying to prepare the new curriculum. The next question we asked was, were the government guidelines sufficient, and had they aided with development of RVE in particular schools? 47% answered yes, with 53% answering no. Of those that answered no, the continuous feedback we got was there was no real clear guidance as to how RVE was different to religious education. What was actually meant to constitute values education? What was the central content that teachers were meant to be delivering here? Was this a skills-based approach? Was there actual subject knowledge they needed to require? How were teachers to monitor progress and review progress in this area of curriculum? There were also some questions surrounding whether ethics and values should be seen as synonymous with one another as opposed to separate aspects of the curriculum. So teachers were really confused as to how they were supposed to identify those areas of the RVE curriculum. We then asked whether teachers believed that the new curriculum would be a benefit to Wales, and particularly was it going to be a benefit to RVE. Now, 40% of those who surveyed answered no, 58% surveyed answered yes. However, of the 58 who answered yes, nearly every single participant added a caveat in their response to say that they didn't feel it was a benefit to RVE currently, that given time to develop meaningful curriculums, given additional support from the government, reassurance of what the purpose of the subject was, how to utilize value and ethics education alongside religion, how to differentiate what is RVE from RE, they felt that this could be a great approach to ensuring religious literacy, ethically informed citizens. But as it stands, they didn't think there was clear enough guidance from the government. They didn't feel there were enough resources. They didn't feel that staff were being given adequate time to develop a new curriculum. So in essence, we're very keen on finding sources of additional support to aid with this. The last main question I want to mention is we were asked, does your school provide training for non-subject specialists to ensure that they're able to meet the demands of the subject? Now, as part of the questionnaire, what we've discovered is the vast majority of schools who participated have reported that RVE isn't taught as a standalone subject, rather it's being taught as part of a mixed humanities curriculum. Now, this means that a significant proportion of RVE education won't be being delivered by someone who's trained to teach religious studies or has an appropriate graduate qualification in a related field such as RE, theology or philosophy. Instead, it means that a large proportion of the curriculum is being delivered possibly by either history or geography specialists. The overwhelming response to this question was no, with 77% of participants saying that there was no additional support for non-subject specialists to help them deliver this crucial curriculum area. With regards to written feedback, many of the teachers who filled in the survey highlighted that there was an expectation for staff to undertake some training in either history or geography. This tended to be twilight sessions offered by the school, where the former head of history or geography would offer guidance on what it meant to teach history, what were the sort of central themes that they'd be covering, what skills should be being developed as part of the mixed humanities curriculum. But there wasn't something similar being offered for RVE. One teacher actually reported that when she raised this with the SLT, that the response was, well, RVE is simply just a group of people sharing opinions. Anybody can teach that, which demonstrates, firstly, that the SLT don't really understand the subject, and secondly, that it isn't being seen as fundamental within certain mixed humanities curriculums as both history and geography. To follow on from that, many teachers reported that when mixed humanities curriculums were being developed in the school, time allocations weren't being split equally between history, geography, and RVE. Quite often, teachers were reporting a significant amount of time being dedicated to history and geography, with a far smaller proportion of the time being dedicated to RVE. One school actually highlighting that RVE was given 3 hours a year as part of the mixed humanities curriculum. Another school reporting it had the equivalent of 1 week's worth of lessons, which I think was 7 at the time. So we're seeing that in some schools who have adopted this mixed humanities approach, rather than RVE being elevated as a subject, we're actually seeing it slowly but surely isolated and reduced from within the curriculum. Those schools that reported that RVE had remained standalone and had a separate curriculum time to that of history and geography, they generally reported that RVE had 1 hour a week the equivalent of 1 hour a week curriculum time, whereas history and geography either had 2 hours a week or 3 hours a fortnight. So still reported that there was sort of less time dedicated to RVE. However, there was substantially more time dedicated to RVE when it was a standalone subject than if it was part of a mixed humanities curriculum. So that is a very whistle-stop tour of the main sort of key findings and headlines. If any of you've got any questions about the data or the research, I'm more than happy to answer. And as I've said, we're more than happy to share a full copy of the report with anyone if you want to request it.
Great, thank you, Josh. Thank you very much for that. Any questions to him, to Josh? At the moment, I think, if I may, when we spoke before, when you addressed the SACRA meeting, you mentioned, not in this area, but in North East Wales, you were finding that teachers were leaving the profession or going across to England, where RVE was a subject on its own and not mixed with humanities.
Yeah, we have continued to find. We spoke to another 3 teachers. So I think when I came to the Swansea SACRA, at that point we spoke to 5 teachers who had either left the profession completely or had moved to England. We're now on, at the last count, 9 teachers who've reported, and for the majority of this now, it is actually moving to schools in England. Obviously, we know nationally, UK-wide, there's a huge shortage in RE teachers, which does mean that if you don't really want to stay in Wales and teach the mixed humanities approach, which in the case of the majority of these 9 was the case, they felt that they were primarily being asked to teach history and geography at the expense of the subject they've trained to teach. No longer felt that Wales was accommodating RVE properly, so have made the decision to move to England, where RE remains a standalone subject, and that they're not going to have to end up teaching additional subjects. This year as well, we're now seeing this impact the number of students selecting Wales for a PGCE. So at Bangor, we have actually developed a system whereby you do your undergraduate degree with myself and Gareth, who are the co-directors of the National Centre, and then we go on to teach the PGCE as well, so that you have that nice thread through with members of staff who've known you for 4 years. And traditionally, that's done really well for our recruitment. It's looking likely that next year our numbers will be significantly lower than we had expected. And the reason for that is the students have highlighted if they go to England, there's a £10,000 bursary to train as an RE teacher. You're guaranteed to be teaching religious education as opposed to mixed humanities. They'd heard from other students who'd done various PGCs across Wales that there had been a minimum amount of teaching of RE on the PGCE placements. They'd mainly been teaching history and geography, and this has deterred students from selecting to do PGCEs with providers in Wales, and instead has led to them moving towards Chester, Manchester, and Birmingham. So yeah, quite worrying.
Fine, thank you. Is it possible you can stop sharing your screen so we can get everybody back onto the screen? There we go. We can see you all. Are there any questions to Josh before I open it up to perhaps Jennifer? Do you want to say something? I can't see any hands up. So Jennifer.
It'd be helpful to go through the scrutiny report now. Would that be helpful, and just extract the main points? So what we've had from Josh is very much quite a gloomy national picture around how RVE is being embedded within the curriculum for Wales, or perhaps not being embedded within the curriculum for Wales. And so as a Standing Advisory Council, our responsibility is very much to both monitor and support the provision of RE/RVE within Swansea. And so what we've done with the scrutiny report is really to kind of drill a little bit deeper and have a look at the situation and whether the picture that Josh has his research has found across the whole of Wales, whether that is represented within Swansea. So if I just take you through the main points of the scrutiny report. So in point one, I think it's fair to say that there's still a huge amount of confusion from all stakeholders regarding the legislative position of both RE and RVE. There's still a lot of misunderstanding regarding the differences between RE and RVE and how they fit within the curriculum for Wales, and also the daily act of collective worship, which of course is very different, and that still sits outside of the curriculum and hasn't received any legislative change since 1994. Since its inclusion in the Humanities AOLE, the expectation for RVE, as Josh has suggested, was that all areas of the area of learning of humanities should receive equity of time, provision and staffing. But the research that has clearly been undertaken and we've heard about today indicates that this is not consistently happening nationally, and we can see from the scrutiny report it's not happening within Swansea either. So if I move to point 1.4, learners and schools now will provide their RE in line with the Swansea Legacy Grade syllabus for years 9 and above. Again, there's a little bit of confusion around the 2 agreed syllabi that we've got in place. And RE is still statutory for all registered learners, including those in schools with sixth form provision. So the legislation is very clear around RE and RVE, and that legislation has been shared with all stakeholders, governors and senior leaders right at the beginning of the academic year. So we have clarity over what the legislation is, and schools are very much aware of what their responsibilities are. If I move to point 3, Swansea SACRA. So Swansea SACRA stroke SAC RVE meet 3 times formally per year, but most recently have decided to meet informally to work on action points and areas of development, of which there are many from the previous meeting. The committee is significantly driving forward with excellence within RVE, and I'm very grateful to all the members for freely giving up their time. If I move to point 4.2.3, where we've talked about the agreed syllabus. The agreed syllabus that we have within place in Swansea is very much the result of extensive partnership working, and in line with legislation has provided schools and teachers with the tools to develop their own bespoke curriculum using subsidiarity. Although it's only been in place for 18 months, we've had a lot of anecdotal evidence from schools and teachers, and the feedback has been very positive, and it was delightful to see that reported within the national report as well, in so much as our agreed syllabus is used not only in Swansea but also nationally. Swansea SACRA will of course continue to monitor its effectiveness. We are expected to review it formally every 5 years, but of course it would be good practice for us to ensure that we review it consistently over the next 5 years as Curriculum for Wales embeds. Moving on to our funding, which I talk about in 5.2. We have been successful in receiving some funding from an organisation called West Hill Endowment, and they have now provided us with in excess of £25,000, which as a standing advisory committee has enabled us to commission outside agencies to provide resources. I think we heard from Josh about how a lot of schools are saying that there are no resources to help them with what is a very tricky and very sensitive area of the curriculum. So again, these resources have had lots of positive feedback from teachers, and teachers talk about how they provided a lifeline of support to help them start their RVE work, and giving them an understanding really of how the agreed syllabus can look in practice. So we're really grateful for that funding, and we've been able to ensure that those resources are available bilingually as well. So they are available for both our English and our Welsh medium speaking schools, and in line with the grant funding, we've shared those widely as well. So I know that schools across Wales are utilising those. Just moving on to professional learning in item number 6, we have undertaken and we continue to undertake extensive professional learning and training for a wide variety of stakeholders. It was really important to start the journey for school leaders and governors to give them an understanding of their legislative duties, and we continue to do that, and how the agreed syllabus has been written to support with the development of high quality RVE. Governor training around RVE is now undertaken on an annual basis. Moving to 6.3. The secondary network meetings are very well attended by secondary schools across Wales, across Swansea, sorry, and provide an opportunity for teachers and RVE leads to be kept updated, and they're really wonderful opportunities for our secondary leads to get together. Moving on to 6.4. This is quite pertinent to me this week. I'm currently in the process of delivering professional learning for NQTs around both RVE and RSE across the region this week. So I spent Monday in Pembrokeshire with our newly qualified teachers, Wednesday in Carmarthenshire, and tomorrow in Swansea with our newly qualified teachers. And what is clear and apparent from my discussions this week is that they've had very, very little RVE training as part of their teacher training in university, particularly with regard to our primary colleagues. So with the exception of one secondary humanities teacher, all of the NQTs that I've worked with this week have indicated that they have had between 0 and 2 hours of RVE training during their time in university. And the vast majority have said that they've had none. The newly qualified teachers that I've worked with this week have trained in Cardiff Met, UWTSD, Swansea University, and also the Open University. And so the lack of basic RVE training for our primary colleagues seems to be consistent across all HEIs. None of the NQTs that I've worked with this week from across the region knew about the RVE legislation or that there was an agreed syllabus in place. So moving on to item 6.7. And I'm really grateful for Josh joining us today. We've partnered with Bangor University. We've also partnered with the Centre for the Study of Islam in the UK, which is based at Cardiff University, to deliver some twilight sessions for teachers in our region to support them with having an understanding of the main faiths and the worldviews that we would expect to be seen delivered within the curriculum. And then moving on to item 6.10. We had our RVE conference that was last week. I'm at very early stages of analysing and collating the evaluation, but at first glance, we've got really, really great feedback. We had over 70 practitioners, mainly of whom were primary, and provided some fantastic feedback. So 96% of delegates rated the day as good, very good, or excellent, and then the remaining 4% rated it as good. So really, really positive feedback from that, which means that the teachers felt that they were far more confident and able to deliver RVE in line with the agreed syllabus. And then moving on to partnership working, I mentioned about our work with HEI, Cardiff University and Bangor University, but we continue to forge positive partnership working as a standing advisory council and an advisory service with a wide range of bodies around RE and RVE, some of which are identified there in item 7.1. And then to move very quickly to data, and I know that Josh talked extensively about data. We know that religious education, as is still in place for our year 9 and above students, is a statutory provision requirement. And clearly that provision does not have to be delivered via an external exam, but if not, it should be provided in line with the legacy RE agreed syllabus. We can see the data in item 9, which indicates that actually a very small minority of our pupils in Key Stage 4 and in Key Stage 5 are actually accessing external qualifications, whether that's GCSE or A-level. And so that will raise questions for us as a Standing Advisory Council with regard to how statutory RE is being met in schools. And so there's some work to do around that, I think, for us as a committee. And likewise for GCSE, we've got similar data there. And then moving to 9.2, we can see the comparison over the last 10 years. And for external exam entries, we can see that there's been a decrease in those entries for GCSE full course, quite a significant decrease in students being entered for A-level, and then a hugely significant decrease for students being entered for GCSE short course. And GCSE short course was often offered as a means of fulfilling statutory requirements. So again, questions will need to be asked from us as a Standing Advisory Council with regard to how those statutory requirements are being met. And then finally, to move on to looking at monitoring, the monitoring that we have via the Estin reports. Unfortunately, not all Estin reports comment on RE and RVE, even though we know that RE and RVE is a mandatory element of the curriculum. This has been fed back to SACRA and in fact was fed back during our last meeting, and will form part of our discussions with Welsh Government over the next few weeks. We've got an organised meeting with Welsh Government officers to discuss that and to raise some of these issues around RE. And then with regard to our kind of following on from the work that Josh has done nationally, following our presentation at our autumn SACRA meeting, we've been able to undertake some small research within our secondary schools. And unfortunately, the findings do reflect the research that is shared by Bangor. There is a significant inconsistency in provision at both Key Stage 3 and Key Stage 4 for RE/RVE. Even though the Curriculum for Wales does suggest there should be parity amongst humanities subjects, in 63% of schools in Swansea, there is not. There is a lack of specialist teachers who are delivering RE and RVE within our secondary schools, with the vast majority of RE/RVE being taught by non-specialist teachers, often without a formal qualification in RE. And given the sensitivities around the subject and faith generally, and some of the issues that we're seeing being raised in England, the controversies that have emerged from this misrepresentation of faith, this really does raise some concern. And then to finish off with regard to school improvement reports, with the support of the school improvement team, we've been able to monitor the work being undertaken around incorporating and embedding RVE within the curriculum within our primary schools via the autumn visits. It's become a priority area for a number of our schools, which has been really pleasing to see. And there's a huge amount of self-reflection and conversation around what's needed with regard to professional learning. The majority of teachers and leads who attended our RVE conference last week were in fact from primary schools. So there is a great deal of engagement, I think, from the primary sector. And that's it.
Great, fine. Well, thanks for that quite, comprehensive report. But it does show that there are some shortcomings, doesn't it, really? And we need to ask really what the plan is. I can see Mike has got his hand up, Councillor Mike Day. Mike.
Yeah, thanks, Jennifer. And I think it's important for us to start off by saying that we really appreciate the work that Swansea SACRA are doing in being able to move this particular thing forward. And as you and I, Lyndon, were on that SACRA meeting, I think we shared common concern about the national picture and how that was possibly being reflected locally. So I think we've already seen and heard from Jennifer that that small-scale research that she's done indicates that there are things that still need to be undertaken. Now, there are a couple of comments in connection with that. One would be that clearly as an authority we need to make sure that we're meeting our statutory obligations at the very least. That's the kind of the threshold level. The second then is in connection with the delivery of this particular topic and an element of watering down within a broader humanities syllabus and curriculum. And I think we need to also to recognise the fact that we're in a state of flux, aren't we? There's the continuing rollout of the national curriculum Cymraeg, and it's going to be some time before it's kind of fully embedded, but it's something I think we need to keep an eye on. So in addition to the issues which Jennifer's already suggested in terms of suggested next steps, there are concerns, aren't there, in terms of the recruitment of specialist teachers and the allocation of specialist teachers to provide delivery of this topic. And I don't know whether there's an opportunity for us to have feedback to the higher education institutions, or even now, I was going to say Welsh Government with the new minister, where there's an opportunity there. And I'd be interested to hear from Helen potentially as to whether there has been any discussions with the Association of Directors of Education in Wales of this particular topic, whether it has been raised and whether there's an opportunity for the feedback of this particular research and the complications and concerns that we have being expressed backwards. And again, so maybe Josh would be able to comment in terms of whether there's any opportunity that he and his colleagues have had in terms of feeding this back to Welsh Government, and whether there's been any kind of response. So I'm sorry, it's been a bit kind of rambling, but I think we are fortunate having people like Jennifer and the support that the SACRA group provide. But there are kind of challenges and concerns, and it's something that we need to keep an eye on closely as we move forward.
Great, thank you, Mike. And I can see Councillor Angela O'Connor's got a hand up.
Hi there, thank you. Thank you also, Jennifer. I know you mentioned that there was no agreed syllabus in place for RV, but some may say that this is actually the case around all subjects in Wales, with it all being very loose. But that's another story. And we have to be mindful on the pressures of the teachers. And so in recruiting the specialists that you speak about, whilst that would be really good, is there any money for that? And on another point, you mentioned 25 grand of funding. Was that to help all the schools in the Swansea area or Wales-wide? And you mentioned that it being really valuable to the schools. So I was just wondering what the schools spent that money on to help add the value, really. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Jennifer.
So the money came into us as a standing advisory council. So it came into us. The bid was put together as a Swansea SACRA, and so we commissioned outside agencies to work on some resources. So those resources, learning journeys and PowerPoints, have been shared widely with schools across Swansea, across the region, and also nationally as well, where they've been requested.
Great, fine, thank you. But I think there is an agreed syllabus, isn't there? I think Angela said there wasn't. There is actually an agreed syllabus that was put together by Swansea SACRA, which has been, I think, dare I say, copied by other areas in Wales, which is.
Sorry, initially there was no agreed structure, was there? That was said initially.
I can see Helen's got a hand up. Helen.
Yeah, on the matter of an agreed syllabus, there's been a long history, a long track record of having agreed syllabi in Swansea. This is not new, but in light of the new curriculum, obviously it's been adopted and adapted really because of the new curriculum for Wales, but that agreed syllabus has been there for many, many years. In answer to Councillor Day's question, whether this piece of national research has been tabled with the Association of Directors, the answer is no. we do periodically receive pieces of research to consider. The most recent one was generally the recruitment and retention of school leaders in Wales. So I think it would be a welcome topic at that table. So if obviously the researchers in Bangor want to get in touch, that can be arranged via the appropriate channel.
Great, thank you, Helen. I think the other point, and maybe Josh or Helen might know, is that there was an issue with teacher training, which is beyond Swansea, and is Welsh Government probably doing something about that? And maybe Josh or Jennifer can answer that. And I can see Helen's got a hand up as well. Helen, do you want to come in first?
Yeah, I don't steal Jennifer's thunder, but certainly I know Jennifer does have influence at a national level, not just working with us in Swansea and regionally. And I think Jennifer sits on a number of fora that can be influential in feeding those messages back. So I hope that's the right thing to say, Jennifer.
Thank you, Helen. Jennifer, do you want to add anything or?
No, I think the research that Dr. Andrews has shared with us is very timely, and this is one small part of the curriculum, and we fully appreciate that. But it's an important part of the curriculum that we get right. It's there's lots of legislation connected with it, and schools do have legislative duties and responsibilities. But more than that, if we want our pupils to become ethical and informed citizens, which is one of the 4 purposes of the curriculum for Wales, then RVE is really the driver with that. Religion, values and ethics is going to be the driver towards supporting our children becoming ethical and informed. And in a society that is incredibly multicultural and very diverse and multi-secular as well, our RVE certainly will provide the knowledge, the skills and the experiences that will help children navigate their way through very complex world and a very, very different world to certainly when I was younger. So it is a very small part of the curriculum, but it's important that we get it right as well.
Great, thank you. Could I now call on Councillor Robert Smith,
thank you, Chair, and I think,
and followed by Josh Andrews.
I think the committee this afternoon has shed a light on a very large number of issues that are ongoing and that need consideration, relating to things like teacher recruitment, the nature of initial teacher education, especially I think in the primary sector, the provision of resources and what schools have available. And we know that this problem is not something that's limited to RE or RVE. It's true of other subjects in Wales. In England, you can have that the market is there for commercial producers to produce these resources and produce books for use to support the school curriculum. That market certainly isn't there in Wales, in the English medium sector, and even less so in the Welsh medium sector. It's not profitable for companies to produce those kind of commercial materials that you can access in England, and that means that others have traditionally had to take the lead here in Wales, and the WJC and Welsh Government have played a role in that, and I think that they still are. What I think is clear, and I pay tribute to her, the work that Jennifer is doing locally is the sterling work that she's doing, and I'd also pay tribute to the work that Sacra is doing in our locality. It's not an easy issue to be trying to grapple with, but I think the will is there locally to do it, and I pay tribute to the way I think that you've been recognised not only locally but certainly from what Josh was saying. There are other authorities in Wales that are relying on the work that or benefiting, I should say, from the work that is going on in Swansea. I think that is gratifying, Chair.
Thanks very much. Could I call Josh?
Yeah, just to confirm some things that have been asked in the last 10 minutes. Firstly, with regards to initial teacher training, obviously last year we did see across Wales a significant decrease in the number of students who applied to do a PGCE in a Welsh university, and again, a significant decrease in obviously those who actually went on to do one. We've spoken to numerous authorities, and there is currently no plans to create initiatives to, in essence, to promote initial teacher training for RVE in Wales. We know England are offering substantial bursaries now for RE teacher training. There won't be something akin to that in Wales for the foreseeable future. Next, over where the report's been sent. So the report is currently, well, a copy of the abridged report has been received by the Education Secretary, and we have been requested to send a full copy of the report across. That went across yesterday, and a full copy of the report has also been sent to the cross-party group for faith in Wales, which is part of the Senedd, and we actually have a meeting with them to discuss the report in more details on May the 22nd. Just the final one to confirm, from both the initial work we've done in terms of the questionnaire, but also with working with schools across Wales, I can confirm the Swansea syllabus is by far the most frequently used syllabus across Wales. Most RVE teachers that I've worked with are very much aware of it and have continually complimented how well put together it's been, how informative it is, and how useful. And also to highlight, obviously, Jennifer is an absolute godsend to the National Centre. I don't know what we'd do without her. She's been so supportive. And again, across the entirety of Wales, most teachers we work with routinely highlight just what, I'm going to go a national treasure she's been in the advent of RVE across Wales.
Do you know, I think we should have patented that, the syllabus we've got locally if it's being sold elsewhere.
I think you're Robert. Yeah, no, indeed. But great. Thanks, Josh. Any other questions from anyone? I can't see any hands up. Can I thank Josh very, very much for taking the time to join us today. Thank you very much. And if we could have a copy of the report sent round to members of the scrutiny panel, that would be very, very helpful. I'd also like to thank Jennifer, for the tremendous work she's doing. And as Councillor Robert Smith, the cabinet member, said, we should have patented it because of the tremendous work that you've done in putting that together. And to get it copied by all those people is certainly good news. But nevertheless, this has highlighted a number of issues that we need to take forward, and obviously there's work to do. But thank you, Josh and Jennifer. So thank you very much indeed.
Yeah, just before we leave the subject, could I ask that maybe we could come back to this at some future date, just to review what progress there has been? I'm not suggesting months. It might be sort of a year or even longer.
Nope, certainly that's something we can see what progress then has been made. Great, thank you. Right, the next item on the agenda is very important, hearing the voices of children and young people. And I don't know who's going to kick off. It's going to be Rodri. Right, Rodri.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be handed over shortly to Sarah as our team manager for education and strategy. As always, I'll try not to steal Sarah's thunder, but just to say, really, it's good to bring a report back to Scrutiny. I think we were with you about 12 months ago, and this is really an opportunity to celebrate the impact of the voices of the children and people are having here in Swansea, not only within their schools, but also on the work of us as council officers in education and beyond into wider directorates. Like yourselves, we're often out in schools, and it never ceases to amaze the impact that the voices of all the children and people in our schools are having within the classrooms and in opportunities within the schools and beyond. And I think it's especially pertinent to celebrate not only now that our schools have school councils, but beyond that, they have individual groups of pupils looking at different elements of school life. So we're seeing that the voices of children and people are being heard loud and clear. So I'll hand over to Sarah to very briefly take you through the report that shows what's been happening in the last 12 months, and then we'll be happy to take any questions or comments then.
great. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, so today's report is an overview of the work of the Education Directorate, but also the Partnership and Involvement Team, which are based in the Social Services Directorate, but they undertake a lot of work directly with children and young people, both within school and outside school. So it was important really to include their work within the report to Education and Skills Scrutiny. Additionally to that, other directorates across the council also directly take opportunities to work with children and young people to seek their views. And some of that was detailed in a report that was presented to the Scrutiny Programme Committee on the 14th of November. So there's quite a bit of detail that's already been reported. So I didn't want to repeat any of that. That's already been published. But just a few highlights from the report really, that as part of the Children's Rights Scheme, children and young people identified 7 county-wide priorities that they would like to be addressed by Swansea Council and public service boards partners. And those include protecting the environment, quiet voices, supporting disabled children, equality for LGBTQ+ children and young people, politics, listening to learners, and feeling safe. So those are really important things that we need to reflect through our policy and service delivery moving forward. So Universal Children's Day. So in our report last year, we reported on a successful day in November 2022, and another successful event was held in November 2023 at the Waterfront Museum. And 100 children and young people across primary and secondary schools attended that event. And as the previous event, where they've shared their views, those are collated and shared with the different relevant directorates. As part of that day as well, it was welcomed that the new relaunch of the Big Conversation happened, and that was a county-wide mechanism to hear the voices of children and young people, and that's where large groups of children from primary and secondary schools are brought together to discuss different topics. During the COVID lockdown, that model changed, and so that was refreshed really, and that's now been relaunched, which is really welcome. In terms of school councils, so the Schools Councils Wales regulations sets out clearly that a governing body of a school must establish a school council. So part of the school improvement team is to check on that as part of their annual work. And then in the report then, the Partnership Involvement Team have detailed a number of different events that they've held both within schools and externally to schools, and that's detailed in the report. So I'll just work through onto the next. So in terms of learner voice in schools, quality assurance and monitoring, so I just mentioned the school improvement team, the work that they do, but also Estin, in nearly every report that they publish, detail their findings on learner voice within schools, and we're pleased to report that in nearly all examples that I've shared there, that was shown as a positive and active thing that was taking place across our schools. Within the directorate, we take learner voice very seriously, and last year we talked about a post-16 survey that was active at that time, and that now has been reflected within the post-16 strategy that's now in delivery. Another active strategy is our draft accessibility strategy, and that's due for consultation now. As part of the development of that strategy, there were opportunities to work with children and young people, either directly or via their additional learning needs coordinator, but there will be wider consultation with different organisations in order to further refine that strategy following the consultation. In terms of future work streams, so during the last year, Partnership and Involvement Team led on a multi-directorate working group, and that group will continue to meet to make sure that we take all opportunities we can to work together on learner voice. And the School Improvement Team will continue to undertake their work and audits as part of their remit. Another thing that we're continuing to explore is how we can use digital mechanisms to obtain learner voice, because sometimes that's, we talked in previous years around quiet voices and making sure there's a range of mechanisms for learners to be able to share their views.
So that concludes a very brief cover of the of the topic, but happy to take any questions.
Great, thanks, Sarah. Thank you, Rodri, and for the work that you've been doing. What I don't know about the other members of the panel, and I'm sure it is the case. I would like to see some of the young people actually come into this panel, and whether we go to them, and it could be maybe in the day for as many of us as possibly could go to listen, directly from them what they think as well. I always remember I was with Sam Pritchard, Councillor Sam Pritchard, and the two of us met a group of young people, and initially, and he said the quiet ones, they didn't want to say anything, and all of a sudden we got them talking. Well, we couldn't stop, and in fact we were late leaving that particular session for that reason. So I don't know about the others, but I would like to do that and make it a priority. But thank you very much for what you're doing. Right, questions. Adam, kick off with you in the room.
Firstly, I just want to say thank you for presenting the report. I just wanted to pay tribute to my ward predecessor very quickly, who I know was instrumental, Councillor Christine Richards, in making sure that I think we were the first city in Wales, possibly the UK, to incorporate the UN Convention of the Rights of the Child into our policy making system. So I've just wanted to say thank you for your hard work on that. In the report, I think it's point 5.8, it says about a Lost Voices project to listen to sort of young people who might typically sort of not have their voices heard. I just wanted to ask, is this something that will be ongoing, and what happens with the information that's collated, and is it fed across the other departments? Because presumably there's a lot of cross-party work that's going to be involved on our part with the children or young people who are involved in this. So yeah, is this work then fed into what other departments do? Is it going to keep going? Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, absolutely. And I'd echo your opening words as well. As somebody who's been working in the council for a long time now, your predecessor was front and centre in making sure the voice of children and young people were heard. You're absolutely right to highlight the Lost Voices project, and it's something that definitely will be carrying on, and it's something to also be a focus of the big conversation going forward. I think the importance of having the big conversation coming back is big conversation sounds like something that it will be your usual children that comes to big conversation, but that is not the case. The big conversation, the membership of the big conversation will change depending on the topic of that time. So really trying to make sure that as many young children, young people as possible can get an opportunity to be part of that. And then as far as it then feeding into council priorities across the board, obviously last year we brought the manifesto from our secondary pupils to the council, and it was really pleasing to see that presented to full council and the impact that had across the political spectrum as well. But also it probably showed really that our minds are sort of very much linked with our children and young people, in that we're all seeing the same things as our priorities, that safety in our community, the environment, etc. And it'll be the same with what comes from the lost voices, the silent voices as well. But what I would say is I think there's more work for us to do there. I think working with our schools, I think our schools are probably better than us as a council currently. I think because with the change in the curriculum, etc., they've really delved deep into how we make sure that the voices of every single child and person has that opportunity to be heard. So really will be a focus for us going forward. And I think it was a great opportunity when we were drafting our accessibility strategy, and really going and talking to parents and carers and the learners, the disabled learners themselves, to find out what their experience was of being in school in Swansea. And hopefully what you see in our draft strategy that's out to consultation at the moment is that that's really shaped where our strategy goes and what our focus will be going forward. But absolutely right to raise it as a priority going forward.
Great, thank you. I can see Councillor Mike Day got his hand
Yeah,
up.
thanks. Yeah, thank you. I mean, first of all, I mean, Rodri will know that this work is built upon a lot of work that he was involved in when I was cabinet member for education as well, and with the reorganisation programme that was going on. One of the critical elements of engaging with stakeholders was certainly with children. And I'm delighted to see how that work has been taken on, to see how they are contributing to shaping not only their specific education, but also education policy right across the authority as well, and the council priorities as indicated. I think if I could just make one comment in terms of the fact that a lot of people say that children are our future. Well, they're not. They're our present, and we need to make sure that we are able to engage with them, because quite often, as the old phrase is, out of the mouths of babes and children, we do get lots of great pearls of wisdom. And just a practical example of how that's impacting upon schools, an exercise has been done for Scrutiny Primary recently, where the school council have actually, as a result of their work, been able to promote the provision of safe crossing through a pelican-controlled crossing near their school, because of the dangers that they themselves have identified. So, we do need to ensure that we don't sort of pay lip service to this. And I'm not saying that we do, but we definitely need to make sure that we are listening properly to the people's voices. So, thanks to Roger and your colleagues for the work they're doing, and as you indicated, the schools, in terms of seeing school council as being a really important part of the life of the school. So thanks.
Great, thank you very much. Any other questions? No, great. Well, can I thank Rodri and Sarah? Thank you for the work that you do, and it's a moving feast and ongoing. But thank you very much indeed. Because a lot of progress, an awful lot of progress, has been made. So, which is great news. The next item on the agenda is an update on education other than at school, and is it? Kate, are you going to take this, or is it Robert or Helen?
I think it's over to Kate in the first instance, Chair.
Great, Kate.
Thanks. Sure. So the purpose of the report is to set out the progress since April 23, when Scrutiny actually came to a visit to my stereo pupil referral unit, and we held the meeting there. So this is an update on progress since the previous report. We recognised in April 23 that the needs of learners in Swansea have changed quite significantly since 2016, which is when the current model of pupil referral unit was agreed. So since the last update to Scrutiny, there have been a number of developments in relation to the changing needs of learners. And in June 23, Swansea Cabinet considered a report, and that report requested permission to review the current model of EOTUS provision in Swansea in order to evolve that provision to something that was more suitable for the current and emerging need. So Cabinet had approved a recommendation from the report, which was to undertake a wider period of consultation with the PIU Management Committee and also wider stakeholders. And that was around really reviewing the current operating model and reviewing it internally, but critically doing that with engagement with those key stakeholders and being informed by their views. So that consultation and engagement period was undertaken, and that's really where the new model proposed for service delivery emerged from. And that model was shared via a further report to Cabinet in January 24, and the model's attached as an appendix to the report, so you can have a look through that. And the January 24 report was taken to Cabinet, and they were able to give us permission then to take forward the new model of service delivery. So at the time of writing this report, I was in the process of undertaking the operational changes required to begin to implement the new model from the 1st of September 24. So it's very much a live picture. But we have just concluded a consultation with staff, and those arrangements are being finalised, currently. So this report will give you some detail on the proposed changes and a bit of an update really on how that emerged. So The consultation and engagement period was really important, and the key stakeholders were the management committee of the pupil referral unit, the staff working in Maesteru, and also learners, both those attending Maesteru PRU, but also those who are in receipt of other EOTA services, because this was more about than just about the PRU. It's about how we extend and maximise that provision for all learners who might need it in Swansea. So the consultation took place over a 12-week period. That did include the summer holidays, so we extended that through into the autumn. And the consultation activity included 2 focus groups out of the management committee, one that had a leadership focus and the other had a practitioner focus. There were 8 principles that were shared with those focus groups, and if you would like, I can outline those because they were quite important in terms of underpinning the decision making and the development of the model. So we wanted to ensure that the model was one that would maximise the current resource available across the vulnerable learner service, so to meet the needs of all learners requiring EOTA's provision, and we wanted to identify the PRU's role within that. So the model has to be one that will achieve better outcomes for our EOTAS learners across Swansea Council, and not just those attending the PRU. We don't expect the model we don't expect the PRU to provide all of those elements. However, we need the PRU's role to be really clearly identified within the continuum of support, and they may need to contribute resource, whether that's physical, human or financial resource, in terms of boosting our other EOTAS providers, such as the home tuition team, EOTAS provision that's delivered via the additional learning needs and inclusion team and the pupil support team. And the aim of that really is to ensure that all of our resources are accessible to as many learners who need them at whatever point in time they might need them. So really kind of incorporating a high level of flexibility and responsiveness. And equally, we wanted to recognise that there may be opportunities for other teams in the Vulnerable Learners Service to work differently with the PRU to develop that relationship and supporting learners who are dual registered with the PRU better, so we can really enhance that model. What we hope is achieving all of those things will help our PRU function more as intended, and that's as a reintegration model, as a service really for our schools, for our children and young people who can access that resource in order, wherever possible, for them to maintain their connection, their place with their mainstream school. We want to work towards addressing the levels of violence and aggression that were reported by staff at the PRU, and we need to provide opportunities to improve attendance, reduce exclusions, and ensure that those learners who are on pastoral support plans receive a package of support that increases their time in education, not necessarily increasing the time in Maesteru, but finding something that was engaging, appropriate for those learners to increase the time that they were receiving a really positive offer. So it's about maximising what works well, addressing the challenges, and then making improvements where needed. And there's an expectation that this is across all areas of the Vulnerable Learners Service. So, it's really about achieving a collaborative approach to achieving and maximising options for learners. And it's using the kind of, the resource we have as flexibly and adaptably as possible. So the focus groups that we set up were invited to kind of propose suggestions and make changes and adaptations to the current model in line with those 8 principles, and collated all of that feedback. And then we also had a consultation through staff engagement, and there were questionnaires provided, which were completed by 36 members of staff in total. All members of staff, so it was including our associate staff, teaching assistants, leadership team, and we had around a 50% response rate, so that was great because we got a real broad spectrum of views. The responses were honest, and they were helpful, and they were definitely constructive. So I analysed the responses, and a summary of the key themes is included in this report. We also thought it was really important to consult with children and young people. So we've just heard about the importance of learner voice. So the staff at the PRU supported children and young people to complete a questionnaire asking about their views on the current provision. And we had around a 22% response rate for that. But we wanted to hear from children and young people outside of that experience as well. So our colleagues in Child and Family Services also worked with groups of children and young people via youth clubs or in community activities, so we could hear their voice in a different context and with a different kind of support focus. So that was really helpful. And our school support team also worked with 9 children and young people who were on our home tuition caseload, and they were receiving an EOTUS offer but weren't able to access the PRU for a variety of reasons. So it's really helpful to explore that and understand a bit more about what would work for them. So we grouped the findings of the consultation into themes with feedback from across all of those groups, and they considered really what worked well, what wasn't working so well, and suggestions for improvement. And they've been critical in developing the new model, so it's emerged almost in its entirety from that consultation and engagement. And that's what was shared with Cabinet in January 24. So we did also consider our data that we hold to make sure that we're planning for future, making something sustainable for the future. So looking at current and emerging need as well. And I've put the links to the Cabinet reports in so you get all the detail there that you can read those if you wish. They're attached to this report. We considered our corporate plans and our commitments, and we made sure that the model is aligned accordingly. And we've also got an inclusion strategy in the Vulnerable Learners Service, which is a key document that outlines the priorities and goals for the service area over the next 5 years. And the proposed model is aligned to that strategy as well. We recognise the significant investment that's been made in the Maesteru services, particularly the Maesteru building, and the proposed model will allow for greater and more flexible use of that resource. So it will be able to meet as many learners' needs who need that. We're maximising the reach of that resource. And we considered our legal obligations as well. So obviously wellbeing of future generations, United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child and ALNET Act are really important pieces of legislation. So we took those into account to make sure that we were really meeting the requirements of those pieces of law. And we also undertook some dialogue with our external providers because we commissioned certain services as well. So it's important to make sure that all of that was aligned. So as I say, I put a copy of the proposed model in with the papers, but it might be helpful just to talk you through the key changes. So the existing primary phase and what's referred to currently as a halfway house in the new model will merge to form a single PRU that operates on a reintegration model for learners in primary and lower secondary. So we've put up to year 8. What we want to recognise in the new model is that for each individual child, they'll have different levels of maturity, development, and so on. So rather than putting a fixed cap on an age, a year group, we want to keep that element of flexibility to make sure that we can give learners an offer that suits them best. So that reintegration PRU model is really important. We think it's a critical part of the offer, but we think it really suits primary and lower secondary age learners best. The provision for learners with social and emotional health will remain. It needs to remain. It's really important. But what we want it to do is to operate on a more flexible, bespoke intervention model. So allowing for earlier and more flexible packages of support to be developed for learners who may be heading towards a direction where they might need that support. We want to offer it as soon as we start to recognise that, rather than waiting perhaps until children and young people have stopped attending school and have become disengaged from that environment. So it's really about a much earlier intervention. And that would then be on a reduced time offer, because we wouldn't need to offer as much to the schools where they would remain in their mainstream schools, and we can offer part of that provision rather than the whole provision. So it's about that partnership working with schools. The provisions for secondary learners will be merged into one provision, and they'll cater for children in year 8 and 9 upwards. So again, not having that fixed age range where it starts, but looking at the learner's individual needs. And that will operate on a flexible, bespoke intervention basis, similar to the social, emotional, mental health. So again, it's about supporting schools, supporting children and young people, providing those services at the earliest possible stage so that we can prevent escalation to exclusion and so on, wherever possible. But we do also recognise that for some young people, they will need a full-time place, and those will be available. That's part of the offer. So it's really kind of extending the earlier intervention element of it while also retaining some full-time places. So the options available to the OTIS panel will be expanded. Schools will be encouraged to refer earlier for preventative interventions, so avoiding that escalation to longer term or full-time placements. And registration at Maestero won't necessarily be needed to access preventative interventions. So, it's an offer that schools can access via the OTIS panel, and you don't need those young people necessarily to hold a formal place, but we can operate on an outreach basis as well. And a special school spoke provision will be established in Maestero building to cater for a very small number of learners who have got a long-term additional learning need. So they require the specialist teaching of a special school expertise, but they need access to the resources of a PRU. So it's appropriate that they would be placed within that PRU environment, but with the specialism of the special school supporting them. So this was the model that was shared with Cabinet in January, and currently in the process of finalising the new staffing structure to ensure that the model is operationally deliverable. The PRU Management Committee have been appraised throughout the process, and they've been updated throughout. So once this staffing structure is finalised, we hope that we'll be implementing by September 24. We will be phasing out the old model because we don't want to disrupt education for any children or young people who are already there, but we'll be able to have that expanded offer from the OTIS panel from September 24. So, and as I say, the appendix and the Cabinet reports are attached as well.
Thank you, Kate, for a really comprehensive report. A lot of hard work has gone in there, and also the panel did, of course, visit Maestero, and we saw firsthand what was going on. I can see Councillor Mike Day has got his hand up here. Mike.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Kate, for a very full and comprehensive report. And as you highlighted, it's great to see how the previous item was carried through in terms of engagement with young people and their involvement in shaping the proposal. So, thanks for that. The other thing which I think is really fantastic about this whole thing is the concept and principle of reintegration, rather than taking necessarily people out for the whole time. But I would like at some point perhaps to understand a little bit more about the kind of the gatekeeping and the process for how pupils would access this, and then more importantly, and this is not something for the near future because, as you say, the model's not been implemented as yet. But again, sort of a future point, coming back to find out how mainstream schools are reacting and responding to this, and particularly in relation to the funding model and how that's all operating as far as they're concerned. And just as an aside, I know that for our purposes, PRU and IOTIS are phrases which we could kind of tag onto the work that was being undertaken. But I know that sometimes the language that we use does have an impact upon how young people and others perceive it. The idea of kind of pupil referral unit. I don't have a suggestion to make in terms of an alternative, but I wondered whether there was something that we could think in terms of changing that particular language. I mean, just as an aside, I know that in the past I've made a bit of a nuisance myself because people have talked about alternative curriculum, and I don't like that phrase, alternative curriculum. I've said that we should be talking about an appropriate curriculum because for some pupils, the kind of academic stream is not necessarily for them. So, maybe it's a kind of a challenge to scrutiny panel members to come up with alternative phrases which would be able to be recognised as something which would be seen as being supportive rather than necessarily taking pupils out of the system Just as I said, and aside from my point of view in terms of the language does convey on occasions our attitudes and approach to this particular group of young people who, through circumstances perhaps not of their own making, have found themselves in this position of needing that extra support.
All right, fine, thanks. Thanks, Mike. Any comments? Back to Mike, Councillor Robert Smith.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And I'd echo what Mike has just said in terms of terminology, and similarly with IOTA's PRA and also alternative curriculum. It is not an alternative, it is part of the curriculum offer and needs to be part of the curriculum offer. And I think there are important points made there. But what I would pay tribute to is the work that Kate has put into this. I think that's obvious from the presentation this afternoon and from the quality of the report. This is about how we use the resources we've got to meet the needs and the current needs of learners. And the needs of learners are changing. We know that all the time. No service can stay still for any period of time, and it's how we have that flexibility. What is appropriate to do in mainstream schools, what's appropriate to do in Maestro, and indeed what other avenues need to be considered. And I think all of that needs to be taken on board, and also how we use that resource in Maestro moving forward. That's no criticism at all of the work that's gone on there, and it is going on there, but it does mean that we are able to use that effectively in responding, as I said, to needs that are perpetually changing.
Great, thank you. Could I call Fiona, Councillor Fiona Gordon? Fiona.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thanks for the report, and it's very interesting to hear this update and how the service is going to respond to change in demand. I just wanted to ask the question, really. You talk about the varied options now, that there will be different sort of pathways through IOTAS and linked with the pupil referral unit. Will that go alongside continued building capacity of mainstream schools to address that prevention element that you referred to? Because presumably there's always going to be demand, and you can increase sort of specialist provision, and schools will say, well, they need to go there, but presumably we need to continue to work with our mainstream schools to make sure that they do everything they can to deal with, for example, emotionally based school avoidance, and prevent exclusions before they even get near the IOTAS pathway then. Thanks. And then I was just a comment on terminology. I referred to Councillor Day's comment, and absolutely, pupil referral units are still referred to under the ALNet Act, but in Carmarthenshire they're termed teaching and learning centres, so Carmarthenshire Secondary Teaching and Learning Centre, but we still refer to them as PIUs, but that's how they're known, as CSTLC. So sorry, thanks.
Great, fine. Thank you. Any other questions, Sue?
Just really, you talked about the bespoke alternative occupation of the youngsters. Can you give us some examples of that? And I do realise everyone is different, but just give us a flavour of what that's. Yeah, please. Yeah, sure, of course. So actually on the model in the papers, it does give some examples of some of the offers that would be made. So for example, and it's interesting, kind of linked to both of those points from Councillor Day and Councillor Gordon. So in terms of that gatekeeping, the IOTAS panel would be the key mechanism really for where schools would refer children and young people in for consideration of something additional, something more bespoke. That panel would have an increased range of offers available to them in terms of what they might be able to offer children and young people. So for example, we have external providers who can look at mechanics, or look at barbering, look at kind of some of the health and beauty packages that young people are interested in. Or it may be that we would look at working with our support worker team to look at some of the approaches. Councillor Gordon talked about our emotionally based school avoidance. So is it that we need to put some additional support for young people's emotional health and well-being in place for them to support them? So that might be that package of support for that individual child. So it's all about the EOTAS panel as that gatekeeper, if you like, that assessor, looking with, and they're made up of a number of professionals, looking at those individual children and young people, what their specific needs are, what we have available as an offer, and how that offer can be tailored towards that child to help them ideally retain their place in their home school and spend the majority of their time there. But for some children and young people, they'll need to spend more time in Maestero. And again, you know, picking up on that point really about the names and the terminology, it's really important. And I think, you know, what the thinking behind calling the PRU Maestero was around giving it an identity, but what we need to be cautious of is making sure that we give it a separate identity, but it is also a service. It's not, you know, it's not a separate school for children and young people. It's something that our schools and our children and young people can access to support them to retain as much as possible within their homeschool environments. Does that make sense?
Thank you, Kate.
Great. Sandra.
Hi, yeah, thank you for the report. I just wanted to ask how well this has been received by the staff who are involved in Maestero and EOTAS, and also whether there's a net gain or a net loss as a result of the staffing structure change.
Yeah, sure. So two parts to that, really. I think, you know, change is difficult, isn't it? So there's been mixed reactions, I think is a fair assessment. A lot of the model has come out of the staff engagement process. So it's come out of really what they've identified as being something that's needed. But, you know, very mindful that they have been through a number of staffing changes over a number of different years. And so it's always difficult, isn't it? So I think it's quite exciting. I think there's like real opportunities, and I think a lot of the staff see that, but also it's still quite raw in terms of you know, a change process, and we are still really in the middle of that. So I don't think perhaps everyone's had the opportunity to kind of look at what the full opportunities may be, and we're still in that kind of, you know, that difficult period of change where people are thinking, you know, what's it going to look like. So the next part of developing that process, again, really critical that we have staff engagement in that. The consultation questionnaire that went out as part of this current staffing engagement has given some really helpful feedback, and we'll use that anonymously to kind of inform and support some of the decisions we make over the next term as we plan to implement for September. In terms of, I think you asked about numbers of staff. Yeah. We've avoided wherever possible any compulsory redundancy, so I don't think we've had any. There are financial challenges, and it's a difficult kind of landscape that we're working in. But in terms of number of staff, there isn't a significant reduction, but what there is more a review of the ways that staff work, so a review of job descriptions, looking at being increasingly kind of flexible in terms of approach, and working on a outreach basis as well, so not just about children and young people coming into the building, but about the staff taking that expertise into schools and supporting school staff. So
I know it's wishful thinking, but I would have loved to have heard you say a net gain, actually. But I understand that it's got to be, you know, people changing their roles at this stage. But in terms of the referrals that are coming into those kind of areas, of course, there does seem to be an increase. I haven't got any data on that, but I suspect there's an increase, which is why I was hoping you would say that there might have been additional funding, staffing, or anything that way.
yeah, sure. I mean, I think, you know, in terms of the funding and the staffing, it has been well funded and well staffed over a period of time. I think the approach we're looking at really is that it's about how we use that resource rather than the amount of resource there is. So I think what's been really critical is looking at yes, you're right, there have been an increase in referrals, and there is, you know, a high level of demand, but the current model, despite its, you know, relatively generous funding and staffing, isn't able to meet all of the needs of all of the children and young people who need it. But we think by reviewing it and amending the model, we'll be able to maximise that provision and meet a greater number of children and young people's needs without having to increase and potentially, you know, we need to look at we need to monitor it carefully and make sure that we're, you know, just cautious in that. But yeah.
Thank you for that clarity.
Right, fine. Any other questions? No. Kate, thank you very much. You know, for that really thorough report, and a lot of work has gone into that, and obviously the work is ongoing. So thank you very much. The next item on the agenda is Part 9 Scrutiny Councillor Group letter. You could see the letter. I don't think there's any comments on that. Okay, and the final item is the work programme, and our next meeting is on the 12th, try the 9th of May, meeting 12, the 9th of May. Moving on into the new municipal year, as you can see, the meetings will start at 4:30 p.m, not 4. Okay, any comments at all? Otherwise, thank you all very much, and thank Team Education, and particularly Robert for coming along, and Helen, and Rodri and Kate who are still with us. Thank you all very much, and have a safe journey home for the ones who have to drive home. Otherwise, everyone else can go downstairs or whatever out of their office and make a cup of tea. Thank you very much.